Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. We're all coming to you here from Zing Train. Thank you for joining us here for our webinar. I'm going to let people filter in for just a couple moments and then kick things right off. Okay, we're going to do it. I have housekeeping anyways, so it'll take a couple of minutes. Thank you very, very much for joining us again. Today's webinar is a practical guide to onboarding new employees. I am Katie Alexander. I'm the community builder here at Zing Train, and I will be your host today. And I'm very happy to bring Elnian back onto your screens for this webinar. She also was our lead last month. She's a trainer here at Zing Train with many, many years of experience training on employee training systems. We also have Mara Ferguson, our keynote liaison, here behind the scenes to monitor the chat and questions with me throughout the hour. We are coming to you live from Zing Train Space in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and we would love to hear where all of you are tuning in from. Feel free to drop your location in the chat by clicking on the chat button. That's how you access chat at the bottom of the Zoom screen. And if you read about any neighbors, be sure to say hi. Before we dive into the good stuff, I have 3 things to help make the most of our time together to share with you. One is the format of today's webinar is we will be presenting. Elnian will be presenting for a bit, and then we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. We'll be collecting questions that you have throughout the webinar. So feel free to submit those questions into the Q&A feature of Zoom, which is another button at the bottom of your screen. We are going to do our very best to answer as many questions as we can. But if we are not able to get to all of them, we will include resources in our follow-up email to try to answer as many things as we can for you. The second is there is closed captioning available, another thing that you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And if you'd like to turn it on, Mara is going to drop details in the chat. And then the last item of business is that we are recording, and we'll be sending out this recording plus the slides that we're sharing by the end of tomorrow in a follow-up email. This webinar will also live on our website, zingtrain.com, alongside lots of other free resources, including past webinars that we have done. So that's all from me. I will see you again for the Q&A, and I'll turn it over to Elnian to get us started.
All right. Thank you, Katie. Pleasure to be back with you. My name is Elnian. I'm one of the trainers here at Zing Train. I've been a part of the Zingerman's team for almost 17 years. Next month will mark my anniversary. And what I'm really excited to share this with you. As we were preparing, we were realizing that how we're going to talk about what we're sharing today, which is essentially our method for onboarding and how we structure training for new employees, is something that we haven't shared in exactly this format before. So we're pretty excited to do this. So with no further ado, let's get right on into it. In that previous webinar, we talked about our approach to training, bigger picture, which we call bottom line training, which we formally define as training that has a positive impact on one or more of your bottom lines. Zingerman's has 3 bottom lines: great food, great finance, and great service. So we believe that effective training hits on one or more of those bottom lines. Otherwise, it may not be a good use of our organizational resources. Bottom line training itself, this approach to training is really made up of 2 key elements: the training compact and the 4 training plan questions. They go hand in hand to create this approach to training that lead to really effective training. And today I'm going to touch very briefly on the training compact, and then we'll spend more time talking about the 4 training plan questions and how we use them to structure these passports. So what I want to highlight today is that this training compact is something that we teach over and over and over and over again. Ideally, if we're teaching it before we even hire people, it helps them understand the way that we want trainees to take ownership of their own experience. And I think when the training compact is working really well and we've got a really great employee, they're viewing this essentially as that the trainee's role is to take responsibility for the effectiveness of their employment at Zingerman's, right? It goes beyond a single class or a single training shift. that if something is unclear to them, that they're expected to ask questions. This really kind of helps get rid of the like, well, I don't know, you never told me. It's like, okay, but did you ask? Right? It's not just up to a manager to magically read everyone's mind and know what they need. Employees need to take responsibility and ownership of their own learning experience. No one can tell them how they're supposed to learn or what they need. And I think that helps differentiate us as a workplace, is that we're going to treat people as adults. This is not kind of the paternalistic, approach to training. We expect people to be fully engaged in their own learning so that they can get as much out of it as they can. So the training compact will be a future blog post on the training compact that goes into a lot more detail on this. So look for that coming in the next couple of weeks. The other thing too is that the other part of bottom line training are these 4 training plan questions that we use to create our training plan or passport, right? This is the basis of that, the heart of bottom line training that is used to create our training plan. This is an actual Zingerman's passport, and I'm going to go over this in a lot more detail momentarily. And in order to create this, we answer each question in order to create this passport. It is a tool that sets the employee up for success for entire orientation period, which is for us 90 days. And hopefully it sets them up for like just ongoing success in our organization. So I'm going to go into a lot more depth about how the passport works, what it looks like, what people like about it. But first, I want to share a couple of details about the 4 training plan questions as we start getting into it. And then we'll definitely refer back to these 4 training plan questions. So question number 1 is, what is expected of the trainee and by when? So there's kind of 2 parts. This is everything we want a trainee to know or to be able to do, starting with the basics that are expected of any employee in any position. And then ultimately it gets more detailed and more specific as they progress through their training. The by when organizes the passport into different time periods. Most commonly we use 14 days, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. That's kind of how we break out the time. And this helps the trainee know they're not expected to know everything right away, right? I think if we don't clarify what the expectations are and when we want people to know them by, they will often assume we expect more of them than we really do. Or they'll measure themselves against their coworker or their trainer and think, man, I am not doing a good job because I'm not nearly as good as so-and-so. Well, that's not actually what's expected of them. So let's tell them that we're going to build your skills over this orientation period, and we don't expect you to be perfect right out the gate. The other thing about the expectations, and I'm going to share some examples of them in a little bit. We work hard to create behavioral performance expectations, not using a lot of jargon or acronyms, right? Because that may be easy for us. Those of us who've worked here for 17 years know a lot of the jargon, but a new employee is not going to be clear on that. It's going to be even more of a mystery to them. And it can be hard to ask questions that you think are a stupid question, right? But it's really something that we shouldn't be expecting a trainee to understand already. So we want to make it explicit about what is expected of them. The second training plan question, number 2, is how will resources be made available? And this is really helpful for the trainee as well. How are they expected to learn this information? Is there a class they need to get scheduled for or signed up for? Are there SOPs, right, standard operating procedures, or other documentation that they can study during downtime? If the training resource is on-shift training or one-on-one, which is the vast majority of training at Zingerman's, then knowing a certain expectation is coming up in a time period lets them know that they need to be asking for help from their coworkers, or if there's a designated trainer, and thinking about, like, who am I going to be working with? When am I next scheduled with that person who's the expert on that area, so that I can ask for their help. We can go over that expectation in my passport. Frequently, thinking about training starts here, but it's much more effective to determine what the expectations are first and then matching them up with the resources. If the resources don't exist yet, they may still need to be developed, right? But starting with, rather than trying to match the expectations to the resources, we want to match the resources to the expectations. And then training plan question number 3, how will we know if the expectations are or are not being met? I think it can be really helpful to think of training plan questions 1, 2, and 3 in conjunction with each other. It often makes it clear that an expectation is not well written when there's no way to tell if the expectation is or is not being met. Right? If it's too discretionary, if there aren't actually clear standards or expectations, then you're not really setting that employee up to be successful in meeting that expectation. For example, in order to know that someone is meeting your customer service standards, well, you need to have the standards in the first place, right? They need to be written down and documented. There needs to be some form of training. We teach our customer service expectations both in a class as well as on shift. And we need to have multiple ways to assess a trainee's ability to deliver on those expectations, right? It isn't realistic that one day they're just going to magically give amazing customer service and then they will do it forever after. These are also kind of the things that I want to assess different elements of it over time. I want to see that they're doing it consistently, right? So the expectations for this might show up a little bit differently. And it's also going to be different what the expectations are depending on what the position is as well. Training plan question number 4, what are the rewards or consequences for meeting or not meeting the expectations? In the context of the passport, typically the rewards are based on passport completion. So I'll share as we go through a little bit later what the rewards are at Zingerman's when a full-time employee finishes their basic orientation passport. So by answering all 4 questions, right, we've designed a training plan that sets the trainee up for success. These all work together and we answer them. We create a passport for every single employee in every single position, right? So let's start getting into it and talking about how do passports work. So first and foremost, it is created by the manager before a trainee starts. Right. And here you see it says not new every time. What that means is that if I own a coffee shop and I'm hiring a new barista, I don't need to rewrite a barista passport every single time I hire someone. I would go and look at the one that I've created previously. And maybe there are some modifications to make that to that. Maybe there are some updates, right? That we realized that the last time we hired someone, I took some notes, didn't go as smoothly as I wanted it to. So I can either update the passport immediately in that moment, or I have the notes so I can update it the next time I hire someone, right? So the idea is that we are creating tools that can be reused and we don't have to start from scratch every single time. So the manager then, oh, and I wanted to mention too, Zingerman's passports, right? And this is the example that I'm going to use. We're going to talk through it. They have 2 parts. So the first 4 pages of this passport, like you can see, I'll talk through this. All of these pages are for Zingerman's wide expectations. Every person in every position, here's what they're expected to know and be able to do. And I'll talk in more detail about some of these expectations too. They are written in a way that they can still be accurate for every single position, but the definition of what success looks like might be different depending on what your job is, or will necessarily be different depending on what your job is. After that, the next 4, 5 pages, 6 pages in the passport are business and position specific expectations and training. Right. So once we get past that, this example, we're going to share it in the follow-up with you. It's a deli retail perishables passport. So Zingerman's Deli, then the department is retail, and then the position is the perishable, someone who's going to work on the perishables. Right. So this is cheese, it's meat, it's olives, right? It's things that have a very specific shelf life. So I'll share some examples that are directly out of here as well. So creating that passport, the ZCOB wide expectations only change maybe every couple of years. The business expectations might be pretty consistent, and then the department and position specifics might get reviewed every 6 months or so to make sure that they're accurate and they're up to date. And one of the ways that you know that a passport needs to get updated is that it isn't working anymore. The employees are not completing it in time, or the coworkers don't know what they need to know in the time frame that you're expecting them to know it. That's a really good indicator that it's time to review what's going on so that you can update it. Okay, so now the passport is created and it breaks it down, as I mentioned, into these different time frames. So this one has by day 14, by day 30, by day 60, by day 90. There are some in the Zingerman's wide expectations that are, instead of being by this period of time, it is from day one, because we're not going to wait for someone to have worked for us for 14 days to expect them to wear the uniform, right, accurately. So I'll talk a little bit more about some of those expectations as well. So now we've got this organized, we've got this broken down, and the manager is going to give the trainee their passport on their first day. And they're going to tell them, here's what the passport is, and here's how we're expecting you to use it. So it's not going to be a mystery. It is a tool for the trainee to use. So I'll talk about that in just a sec. What I want to share with you next, so this, I've been showing you this physical version of something. This is what the outside of it looks like. We call this the passport jacket. So you'll see that there's room for the trainee's name, what is the business that they work in a department, and this doesn't always get completed, but what is the target completion date? When do we expect the trainee to be finished? So what is the 90 days? On the back, you'll see the training compact here, right? Because we want people to have this in their mind, and we want them to be able to see it and review it and think about it, and that definition of bottom line training, that they know that all of the training that happens at Zingerman's is designed to have a positive impact on one or more of our bottom lines. The other thing that you can see at the very bottom, you really can make a difference. This is a play on our Zingerman's primary message, which is you really can taste the difference. And so our employees really can make a difference. On the inside of the passport jacket, they're not going to see this quite as much because all of the pages that are in here are going to cover up what's written on the back. But you'll see it's our mission statement. We really view the mission statement as our North Star. It is there to guide us in all of our actions. Whether you deliver the Zingerman's experience directly, we are all there to share the Zingerman's experience. And so it's a good thing for people to remember and to have in front of them. We've also got a couple of tools here that you'll see that are on the back inside of the passport jacket, are 4 levels of learning. Right? We want people to always get to assimilating and acting as a result of training. And then the highest level of learning is teaching, which is very highly encouraged at Zingerman's. And then in the bottom, you see our 5 steps to effective on-shift training. So this is a helpful reminder for trainees, for trainers to have in their hand and have accessible as they're going through the training period. We're not going into the 5 steps. We have a different virtual workshop on that. It's a great training tool, and we do a lot of on-shift or one-on-one training. So back to kind of how passports work, the trainee, right, they own their passport. So they are responsible for holding on to it. They're responsible for making sure that it gets signed off on. I will tell you that passports over the years have 100% been washed. Passports have gotten lost. They have been in cars, that they get shuffled under the seat. They get thrown in someone's backpack and they can't find it for like 3 weeks. It is important for the trainee to kind of know and hang on to their passport, because they're expected to have the passport on them when they are working. And that's why this is, it looks like an actual, it's pretty similar in size to an actual, US passport or international passport. I guess they're all the same size. They're designed, most of our employees wear jeans or, pants as a part of their uniform. And so it is designed to fit in the back pocket of someone's jeans, right? It's pretty convenient. It's not that hard for them to have it on them. And one of the questions we often get is, why do we have them physically as opposed to electronically? Well, one of the things I can tell you is that we're primarily restaurant and retail businesses, although passports do work in all different kinds of businesses and industries. And we don't really want our employees on their phone on the sales floor, right? It doesn't look great from an optics perspective when a customer walks through the door. But if they're looking at a passport physically in their hand, it's really easy for them just to close it and put it in their pocket and help the customer, right? It feels really different in the moment versus having to find a document, open it, zoom in, right? Do all these different things versus I can see this physically in front of me. I can look at it with someone next to me. We can both read it, see what's on it. It just has kind of a different feel to it. The other thing is that passports, we talk about how will we know if the expectations are or are not being met? They get signed off on. There is a spot for a trainer or a manager. Sometimes it's either, when we say peer, It's because coworkers do a lot of training of their peers. So they may not be a formal trainer, they may not be a class instructor, but they're someone who's going to show their coworker how to do a job. And they can sign off on each of the different expectations. That is essentially the reward sometimes, is that I know that you can do this, that you know this information. I'm ready to sign off on it for you. And that's also why it's really handy to have this physically, right? We don't have to go to a special document. We've got it right there, super easy, right in front of us. Passports are also reviewed with the trainee. I mean, the trainee holds onto it, right? They own it. So their manager might come to them if they're having regular check-ins, which hopefully they are in someone's orientation period. Their manager might check in and say, hey, like, let's take a look at your passport. How are you doing? Like, is there anything that you're feeling stuck on? What can I do to help? The manager's role is not kind of the oversight or the kind of, again, the paternalistic, like, have you done this thing? It's more of a coach. It's more of a support, right? Encouragement. And that feels really different from the trainee perspective as well. And then it's also, just to be clear, like I mentioned this before, the rewards are based on the completion of the entire passport. So I'll share some specific details about what those rewards are for passport completion. That, it happens. They're pretty big. It's not that there aren't any other rewards as they go through their passport, but we'll share the ones that specifically relate to this tool. Okay. So let's get into some examples. So Zingerman's wide expectations, one of the extremely common, is that they arrive on time for all scheduled shifts. I want to be very clear. What the passport does is not tell every single person who works at Zingerman's what does on time mean for them, right? That would be defined for them through the training resource, which is their manager. Right? Different businesses have different needs from their trainees. We have different expectations for what on time means for a manager versus a frontline employee. Right? When I worked a long time ago at our mail order business, we were expected to kind of punch in, and now it's done digitally, but even so, you were expected to punch in no earlier than 5 minutes before your scheduled shift and no later than 2 minutes before the shift was supposed to start. Right? What this does is it really helps cut down on some of that creeping overtime that can happen, and to make it clear that if you want to get coffee, if you need a snack, you can get here whenever you want. You can have coffee in the break room. You can have a snack. We often have extra pastries available for people to eat. But you're not doing it after you've punched in, right? You take your coat off, you get yourself fully ready, you punch in, and then you are logged into your position, right? If you're on a computer, when I was working in the service center, I was ready to go at my computer when my shift started. That's kind of where that buffer comes from. I'm a salaried employee now. On time means something really different. I generally get to work, if it's a non-training day, somewhere around 9. And knowing that most of my coworkers get here around 9, we will let each other know if we're not going to show up on time, right? It's just really different. If I don't get here until 9:15, it's really not that big of a deal. But that is defined by my specific manager. So the measurement for this is observation and feedback, right? If all of a sudden over time, my manager starts to see that 9 becomes 9:15, it becomes 9:30, it becomes like I'm rolling in close to 10, right? With no notice, with no updates, right? That becomes a performance issue. And this observation and feedback in someone's training period, that is going to be not signed off on right away. So this is one of the early pages that it says from day 1, you're expected to arrive on time for all scheduled shifts. So if a trainee, right, I mean, this could be a coworker, if they come to me and they say, hey, Alnian, I think I'm ready for this to get signed off on, will you sign off on it? And I know for sure that they have not actually been arriving on time for all scheduled shifts, I might say, I would be happy to sign off on that for you. When I see that you have arrived on time for the next, 2 weeks consistently, right? I mean, that is part of the push and pull of this, is that just because someone asks me to sign off on it, it doesn't mean that I'm automatically going to be ready to do it. So just that is one example of an expectation, and how the training resource and then the observation and feedback. These get laid out differently, kind of in more of a grid, and it goes horizontally in an actual passport, and then you'll see that in the follow-up too. So for example, another one, this is an expectation for everyone who works at Zingerman's that they attend the class, The Art of Giving Great Service. This is our approach to service. It covers our 3 steps to giving great service, our 5 steps to effectively handling complaints. We do role plays. We talk about why it's important that we give great service. We define who our customers are. We teach them how to document a compliment and how to document a complaint or product request or suggestion. So the training resource is this 2.5-hour class, right? It's because the expectation is that they attend the class, right? I'm not going to assume that they know everything they need to know about customer service just from having attended the class. We also teach customer service in a couple of other ways, but the instructor, I am someone who teaches this class internally and have for a very long time. I would sign off, I would write my initials and the date in someone's passport when they have attended the class. Right? Which also means, as the instructor, they were here at the beginning of the class and they stayed until the end. The other thing that I've learned to do, because people do in fact lose their passports or wash them, they go through the washing machine. I make a note every time I teach of who is in my class and what business that they're from, so that if for any reason they need to come back around and say, hey, Elnian, 2 months ago I took your service class, will you sign off on this? I can go back and say, hold on, let me double check. Yes, you were here. I mean, hopefully I would remember the person, but sometimes it helps to have it written down. Okay, so that's kind of how this would work. To get into a more position specific, again, this is one of the examples from the passport that I keep waving around here. So this is for the deli retail perishables position. The expectation here is that they're able to wrap 6 different types of cheese properly, right? So the training resources would be on the job. A coworker would show them how to wrap each of the different types of cheese. There would be an SOP that accompanies it, right? Or a standard operating procedure. It might have written instructions as well as a picture of what does it look like at different steps in the process? What does it look like? What does the finished product look like when it's done correctly? And so then the sign-offs, there would be 6 different ones, right, in the passport for each of the different types of cheese shapes that they're talking about here, right? And so you can see the different types of cheese that they would be expected to know. And this is also where, you know, when I talked about in the 4 training plan questions, what is expected of the trainee and by when, these are the most commonly sold types of cheese. Right? We don't need you to learn how to wrap a fiddly piece of cheese that we rarely sell, right? Or that even if we sell it, there's always going to be someone who's working with you that knows how to do this. Like these are the ones that we would sell the most commonly. So let's start here, right? So this is also an education component where it's not just you're learning how to wrap these different cheeses. You're learning a little bit about kind of the commonalities between these different cheeses. You're learning about some of our best sellers for each of these. So some of them, like Gruyere is obviously a type of cheese. The City Goat is a specific cheese that comes from Zingerman's Creamery. It's a hand ladled fresh goat cheese, right? The Bridgewater is also a cheese. It's kind of like a brie that our creamery makes. So it's there's specific size and shape. Right? Taleggio, I mean, is a type of cheese. Piave is a type of cheese. Montgomery's is from a specific producer of a type of cheddar, right? But we just want them to understand kind of what we're going for here. Then let's get into, so another kind of, let's continue with some examples. We've got customer service. So an expectation here is that someone uses the 10-4 rule in all interactions, internal and external. So the 10-4 rule is a key part of Zingerman's service approach. What it means is that when someone comes within 10 feet of you, you make eye contact and smile. And when they come within 4 feet of you, you verbally greet them. This is something that is 360 degrees. It applies to every single other person that you come into contact with, right? So regardless of what position you're working in, you need to be aware of what's happening around you. This applies to delivery people, to someone who's lost. When you're just walking through, we're still making eye contact and smiling. So the training resource for this, it's the AGGS class, which is in fact jargon. It's the Art of Giving Great Service. I think it's one of the first acronyms that people learn when they first start working at Zingerman's. We call our approach to service AGGS internally. And they're going to get a lot of on-the-job training about this, right? So like if you're working in a specific position, what is 10 feet? Not everyone is good at spatial assessment, right? So let's actually help them figure it out. Like that is about what 10 feet looks like. Here's about what 4 feet looks like. For some of our businesses, 10 feet is actually through glass, right? It's outside. So if someone's walking by and you're inside, your eye contact can still go through glass. So the observation and feedback is the right measurement here, because 10-4 is something that's really easy to see whether it's happening or whether it's not. So that feedback they might be getting from the manager, they might be getting it from a trainer, from a coworker, and it's something that we would want to make sure that they're using really consistently before it gets signed off on. Another less retail-based customer service expectation is answering the phone, right? Using whatever your standard system is or your standard process. So here we expect the phone to be answered within 3 rings. And we have a pretty standardized script for people to use when they answer the phone, which is like right now, I would say, good morning. Thank you for calling Zing Train. My name is Ellie, and how can I help you? Right. So it's good morning, good afternoon, good evening. What business did you call? Right. This is whatever business we're talking about. Identify yourself and then offer assistance. Right. So this is, again, on the observation and feedback is really easy to know if it's happening or not. So the training resources is the class, it's on the job. How will we know it's happening? It's one is role play is a great way to know if people are doing it, right? We just go outside and call on our cell phone, and we do observation and feedback. I will also say that one of our common expectations is that you use the sick, like, whatever your sick call policy is, but not everyone's actually sick within their first 90 days of working at Zingerman's. So this is either observation and feedback, right? They did it correctly with their manager, or we'll role play it if they haven't actually, they don't have to call out sick in order to get this signed off on their passport, right? That feels like an unfair expectation for them. So these are just some of the different examples of what real passport expectations are, right? Taken from this one that we're going to share as an example, taken from other ones that exist at Zingerman's. What I want to do before we go on, the next thing I'm going to talk about is passport completion rewards. I'm going to check on the questions to see if I can answer them while we're still talking about this. So I see Greta has asked, how do you define a trainer? Do we have a train the trainer course? Yes, we have train the trainer. This is such a good question. So yes, our team members expected to seek out trainers for certain items, and if so, how did they know who the official trainers are? This is something that they would hear from their manager. So as we're going through the expectations, if it says like on the job, that conversation might be, Mara, my coworker, is like, she's the expert in cheese wrapping, so she's going to help train you on that, right? Or any one of your coworkers can be the person who helps sign you up on that. The other thing too is that the coworkers, they want fellow coworkers who are competent at their job. So they're not going to sign off on things until they know the person is really able to do it. So there are some expectations that are like, this needs to be a certified trainer. You need to take a class from an instructor, or like your manager will be the one that signs off on it. There are a lot of other things that we are working with peers. They might even be people who got hired 2 weeks before us, but have gained proficiency at whatever the task is that they're training on. So we do have a train the trainer class at Zingerman's. We do have some things that people become a certified trainer in, whether it's on shift training or teaching a class. And most often it is a peer. And that's something that the manager or another trainer would tell the trainee. And they can ask, right? This is also them living their side of the training compact by asking questions about it. And then someone also asked, how would you measure arriving on time for every scheduled shift when working remote? That is a tough question. I think that is something that we don't have as good of systems about that. Some employees in our organization are required we have an HRIS, right? An human resource information system that they essentially log in and say that they're starting their shift on an app or the website when they start their shift. And we have hourly employees at Zing Train who do this, and then they sign out or log out. For many of us that are hourly, so on time is not as important as making sure that the work gets done, right? So it's about someone's overall performance. It's not as explicitly about the amount of hours that they're working. And this is also something that, I mean, we use Slack a lot at Zing Train. I can tell if people are working a lot of the time because they're green on Slack. I can tell that they're logged into Slack. So I think there are different systems that you can put into place to see, is someone working? Are they online? I also know that working remotely, we've just developed a lot more flexibility about the hours that people work, especially those with kids, right? So they may leave work at 2:30 or 3 to go pick up a kid. And now, they're gonna log back in and do some work later on in the evening, but it's more about, so their measurement of their success is more about the work getting done, not about the specific hours that they work. So a good question. And unfortunately, the answer is really, it depends. So what I want to talk about next is passport completion rewards, right? So you saw there's a bunch of different pages in here. I would say there's probably about 10 different pages in this passport with a bunch of different expectations. Once this is finished, we consider someone out of orientation, and some of the benefits are you get an additional 8 hours of paid time off. Right? This is for full-time staff. It's a little bit different for part-time or occasional staff, people who don't have a set schedule, and that is negotiated more with their manager. But I wanted to focus on full-time employees. So an additional 8 hours of paid time off, which is great. You also qualify for your Zingerman's Wide discount card, which is a pretty great thing. You get discounts in all of the other Zingerman's businesses, which also encourages our employees to be customers in the other businesses, to know more about the kind of the wider Zingerman's community than their own specific slice of the business. And as someone whose business is not food, I really appreciate getting a discount on the delicious food in all of our other businesses. That is a big driver for a lot of people to get out of orientation. You also get $30 towards the cost of slip grips. It used to be Shoes for Crews. These are different companies that provide slip resistant shoes. So we've developed a partnership with this company. We would pay them $30 like the first time someone orders a pair of slip grips. Many of our in kitchens in particular, they're required to wear slip resistant shoes. So rather than expecting someone to go out and pay for it completely out of pocket, we give them $30 towards it. Another great benefit is that you get reimbursed 25% off the cost of a massage from a certified therapist, right? And there's no cap on this. You can go get massages every day if you want and have 25% of it reimbursed by the business. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone taking advantage of that too much, right? That they had to have like a conversation about like, what are you doing? So, I mean, it's just a really nice thing. People taking care of their physical selves is good for the business in the long run. So I think that's a really nice benefit. Another great one is that people are eligible for promotions or raises, or we do gain sharing as part of open book management here. So if you are not out of orientation, you aren't eligible for any of these things, which again can be a really big driver for people. That if you complete your basic orientation within 90 days, right, and then a supervisor position comes up, you're now eligible to apply for that position. I mean, you might not be a great candidate for it, I don't know, but something to consider. And some of our businesses, they actually have a different wage for people once they're out of orientation. Right. The intention is that we hire you at maybe $15 an hour, but once you complete orientation, you'll be working at $16 an hour, $17 an hour. Right. This really depends on the business and the position, but it's something that, again, it can be a really good driver for people to complete their orientation. So those are some of the passport rewards across Zingerman's as an organization. Now, what I want to talk a little bit about, why do people like this so much? This is a really revolutionary way of doing things. So what are the benefits of it essentially, or why do people like it? So starting, I'm going to talk about trainers or trainees. I'm going to talk about managers, and then I'm going to talk about trainers or coworkers. So why do trainees like the passport? One is it tells them what success looks like, right? And it's broken out by time. So they're not measuring against other people what they're supposed to be doing. This is very clearly explicitly saying, like, you're doing a good job right now. You're exactly meeting our expectations. And that feels really good. It's comforting to know that. It also gives them clear next steps if they want to progress, right? So most of the time, people might be working on their day 14 expectations, but they're looking ahead to day 30, to day 60, to day 90. so that they can kind of plot out their time, right? If we're completing our day 12 or day 14 expectations, and one of them in this passport is that you scheduled your day 30 test, right? Or product knowledge test. I want to start looking at, what does that test look like? How much am I going to need to study for it? I want to start planning out. I'm a planner. So I want to start planning out what am I going to need to work on next? So I want to finish this in this correct order, and I want to be looking ahead. It also, I think, is really helpful because it gives them a common language to use with their manager, with their trainee, and with their coworkers. So they start learning a little bit of our jargon. We have a way of talking about their passport completion, or their training plan. They are able to ask for the help and the support that they need in the context of completing their passport. So that can just be really helpful for people who haven't worked in a job like that expected them to take more responsibility before. I also think a big benefit is that it empowers a trainee to take initiative on their learning. So we talked about an expectation is that you attend a class. If you see that the class isn't scheduled, right, or it's not on like our published schedule, you don't just like shrug your shoulders and be like, oh man, well, I can't take the class. Oh, it's not on the calendar. No, like you talk to your manager. Your manager or you could reach out to the class instructors to say, again, I would really like to take this class. I need it in order to complete my passport. Could you schedule one within the next like 2 or 3 weeks or the next month, right? I mean, there are some classes we try to have scheduled really regularly. There are times when they really don't work for people's schedules. We actually had someone who was a night delivery driver for a while who got certified to teach the Art of Giving Great Service class so that he could teach it really late at night. So for all of our overnight staff, that was great because then they weren't trying to take the class, as I have taught it to many people, like at 9 a.m. after they've completed an all-night shift, right? So it really allows people to take initiative on their own learning to ask for the help that they need. And this is, I think, helpful. They know how and when that they're going to be rewarded. Right? It isn't something that's a mystery to them. It's not something that's held over their head. They are driving their own success. So then why do managers like the passport so much? I mean, this is more work, right? In order, especially to set up passports, to design them in the first place and to move forward. Well, one of them is that when the trainee knows what's expected of them, they are so much more likely to actually meet those expectations, right? And I often teach this in terms of customer service, where managers are very clear in their mind what they expect from the trainee, but they don't always tell them, right? They don't have tools to do that. They don't have it written down, but they know what it looks like when a trainee is doing their job really well or an employee is doing their job really well. The challenge is if you don't actually tell the trainee is going to default to doing what they think is right or what they got trained to do in a previous job, which may not actually align up with what you want them to do. And then the manager gets annoyed or disappointed that the trainee isn't doing what they expect the trainee to do. The employee feels that. They know their manager is frustrated with them or that they're irritated, but they don't know what they did and they don't know how to fix it, right? This is just a really common, unfortunate dynamic that if we can make it really clear, here's what I expect of you and here's by when, then the employee can like live up to our expectations rather than continuing to fail to meet them. They also like it because things are documented. Other people can help do the training. It's not just all on the shoulders of the manager, right? Managers can really become a bottleneck in terms of training when they're the ones who are expected to download everything to the new employee. They have other responsibilities, right? And so, and that's understandable. That's reasonable that they don't do all the training. So, but when you get things documented, when the expectations are clear, other people can step up to help. And it's not just all on the shoulders of the manager. The passport, we get greater consistency. Everyone was trained to the same expectations, ideally in the same way, right? With the same SOPs, the same documentation, so that we have a lot more consistency around what are people expected to do, and then them actually doing it in the way that you want to. That's a big one. And in the event an employee isn't actually meeting your expectations, it is not a surprise to anyone. So the time frames, right? If someone is really struggling to meet day 14 expectations, and we decide, you know what, this rarely happens at Zingerman's, but for any reason we decide like, I don't want to keep investing a ton of time and energy into this person when they are continuing to not meet expectations, right? That might be the like, it is not a surprise to the trainee that they're not meeting the expectations, right, as well. I have a colleague who's now the managing partner of our event venue, Corn Man Farms, and she is really, really good at firing people. And it is never a mystery to the other person that it's going to happen, right? Because she's got really clear expectations. They know they're not meeting them. They have been given a chance to kind of change their behavior, and they haven't done it. So day 14 might not be the right time frame, but I would say day 30, day 60, like we don't necessarily need to keep going if the person is really struggling with it. We also, though, I mean, we don't want to be too quick to act. Maybe they are a non-native English speaker and we're only talking to them in English, and they just need a little bit more time in order to learn things. Maybe they have a learning disability that they need more time to process something, or they need to learn it in a different way than what we've been teaching it to them. I will say we don't rush to that. And just it's helpful when nothing is a surprise when we eventually need to part ways. I would also say the managers like it because employees are much more likely to ask for what they need in order to finish doing the passport. They will take responsibility for their learning and ask the manager for help. If they need to get a class scheduled, if they need more assistance, if they need more time, we're talking about it up front, not as the deadline just breezes on by. So then why do trainers and coworkers like the passport so much? Well, one, they know how they can help, right? I think about this. I am not a manager here. I am a trainer, but I have helped coworkers through their passports. So I might have, if we have a new admin person, I can say, hey, you know what? Let's take a look at your passport. Is there anything I can help you with today? I have time. Is there anything on there that I can particularly help you with? That feels really good as a coworker. I want to be able to support the learning of my peers. It just feels really good. And ultimately, when people are following the passport, it results in people that are better trained, right? And they're more functional coworkers. People know how to do their job and they're doing it well, right? Because we gave them the training, we've signed off on it. We know that they know what they're supposed to do and they're doing it. We also, like, it's really helpful. As I mentioned, I can check in with the trainee and say, okay, like where are you on the passport? I can pretty quickly see, oh, you haven't learned this yet. Okay, let's do this thing next. Or, oh, it's not an expectation for you to learn that for another like 30 days. I'm not going to spend my time focusing on what I want to teach you, this esoteric thing that you may never actually need to know. No, I'm going to prioritize what they really need to know in the time frame that we're in. And then lastly, the passport helps lessen the need for kind of this ongoing mental list of everything I need to cover. And it helps us prioritize the information that the trainee needs to know, kind of in the way that they need to know it or in the order in which they need to learn it. I also want to be clear. So I just taught, we have a two-day training seminar called Bottom Line Training. I just taught it last week. And one of the things that I thought was really it just came up a couple of times is the passport does not preclude the need for a training checklist, right? Or for training, we often call them flight plans, right? They go hand in hand, they just serve different purposes. The training checklist is almost always, what have I told the trainee? Like all the things I need to make sure that I tell them. It is not the same as the passport, which is the trainee knows and is able to do what they need to do in order to do their job. So one is a tool for managers and trainers. The other one is really a helpful tool for the trainee. So I just want to, like, as I was wrapping this up, I wanted to talk about that. I also wanted to talk about what are some other uses for the passport, because we don't only use it in terms of onboarding, although that was the main part of this conversation. We use this structure for ongoing performance, right? It's a part of annual reviews. I get a passport for the next year. It's not quite in this fun format. It's just a single sheet of paper, but it is like, here are what the expectations of me are. Here are the additional training resources. So sometimes it might be things like professional development, where I go attend outside training in order to continue to develop my skills, right? Sometimes it's feedback from coworkers, or that I'm doing a certain amount of training internally at Zingerman's, as opposed to most of the training that we do, which is with people outside the organization. It's really really a nice way to organize that. We also use these for supervisors and managers, right? So as you continue, if you move from one Zingerman's position to another Zingerman's position, you're not going to repeat your basic orientation part of it, like the Zingerman's wide expectations, but you would get the passport that is for that business and that position, right? So at the deli, we talked about retail perishables. If now I want to train on retail dry goods, like I don't get a whole big fat passport. I get a smaller passport that is specifically focused on dry goods to continue to improve. So I guess I got into my next one, which is ongoing learning. We also have something called the University of Zingerman's, which is not an accredited organization, but it is a way for people to further their internal learning, which some external learning on different topics that are core to the way that we choose to operate. And so to that end, we also sometimes have like Zingerman's wide, we have mini games or tune-ups that will often have a passport. So, you know, if we're going to do a tune-up on customer service, there might be certain expectations for someone to complete in order to win a prize, right? Like you retake the Art of Giving Great Service class that I mean, I can't, we've done a bunch of different tune-ups around customer service, but I can't think of other ones right now. But it's again, because people are familiar with this format, it's very familiar to them when they see it in different contexts. We also, you know, someone asked about train the trainer. So that is part of the like University of Zingerman's. You can get a certified trainer associate's degree, which is that you get certified to teach a class or you get certified for on-shift training. So there are certain classes that you take. If you're teaching a class, you take a how to teach class, right? So how to teach the Art of Giving Great Service, for example, you co-teach it, you teach it on your own with observation, right? And then you get ongoing certification by teaching the class and being observed twice a year and by observing someone else and giving them feedback at least once a year. So the passport works for that as well in terms of staying certified. So other ways to use the passport. I see that there's some more questions have come in. That is exactly what we're going to do next. I wanted to carve out a little bit of time for that. So I'm going to open up the chat and see what we have going on here.
I'll pop back in too. I'm happy to be the voice of our audience for you, Elmian.
Great.
So we do have a question from Jenny. She asks, can someone complete their training in 30 or 60 days versus the traditional 90?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, 30 days would be really hard, I think, for most positions. There's a lot to learn, you know, just thinking about the Zingerman's wide expectations, let alone the business or position. But 60 days, certainly. When I started working at Zingerman's, our orientation period was 60 days. We have expanded it to 90 days. We've added a couple of different things. When I first started here, healthcare or health insurance was one of the benefits you got when you completed your passport. So that was a major driver for getting it done. You know, we've changed our approach on that, but yeah, I would also say that passports are designed to be completed in that amount of time. So if someone is having a really hard time completing it in 90 days, we don't fire them. We do our best to help them complete it. When we've had clients, you know, start doing the passport, the first couple of rounds of it are a test period, right? I mean, did you design it that it was really easy for everyone to do and like you thought it would take 90 days and it's actually taking people like 30 or 45? Or did you just pack everything that you ever would want someone to know and it's not actually going to take them 90 days, it's going to take them 6 months, right? I mean, this is part of the learning and the modification as time goes on. So it's a good question. And so, a lot of times people complete their passport early, but not always. And someone also asked, do you have a course on writing SOPs? We sure do. It is called How to Write SOPs. It's a virtual workshop. You can find it on our website, or Mara might drop a link for that on the website.
It was just dropped.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
All right. What other questions do you have about passports or how they work at Zingerman's? Oh, yes. Okay. So what is the difference between hourly versus manager passports? Well, for one, when we hire someone who's going to be a manager, they complete a basic orientation passport before they get their manager passport. So they're not expected to meet manager level expectations until I believe it's, Katie, I mean, I don't know if you know, it's like 6 months or 9 months it has a longer time frame because there are just different and more complex expectations than for an hourly employee.
Yeah, I believe it's 6 months because then when you take basic orientation plus the manager, it becomes a 9-month period.
Mhm. So I will also say that frequently people do not get their manager passport until after they complete basic orientation, because what we want them to do is to get grounded in our business, in our systems, the way that we operate, in our culture first, before they start kind of the additional complexity of the manager passport. Now, if someone already works at Zingerman's, then they're not going to go back through the basic orientation passport. They're going to start with the manager passport. So it will be 9 months from when they get that. Sorry to step on your question asking toes, Katie.
Oh, that's quite all right. I'm glad that you have easy access. If anyone has any other questions, I'll just give it a couple more moments in case someone is typing. I also just, Danielle has another question. Would we be willing to share the basic passport that managers complete?
So that is highly specialized based on the business and like what kind of manager it's going to be. So Danielle, I'll reach out to you directly to see which one would be the most helpful for you. It's very keyed into what their actual position and responsibilities are. Yeah.
I'm going to take this as a sign. I mean, I think this webinar was very just like so specific to a tool in a way that I imagine you were answering people's questions along the way going into things. I will just do a little wrap up here and keep my eye out just in case anything else does pop up. But thank you all so much for joining us for this hour and asking great questions and being so engaged. Thank you, Elnian, again, for sharing your time and your expertise with everyone. We would love to hear what people thought of today's conversation and what you might like to see in future webinars. Your feedback directly impacts what we do here. And so Mara has dropped a survey. Thank you. And you can please just take a moment and fill that out for us. We will also be sending out this recording and the slides by the end of tomorrow. So be sure to look for that in your inbox. And that's all we've got. Have a really great rest of your day. Bye.